Today, on April 5th, this is not a coincidence. This is not random. This is not just another video that happened to scroll across your screen. Today, on April 5th, God says you have been under spiritual attack. And He is not whispering this. He is sounding an alarm. There is a reason this message found you now. There is a reason you felt compelled to open it. Because something has been building quietly, subtly, almost invisibly around your home. And the Lord is saying, I am trying to warn you before something serious happens in your home. Don't scroll past this message. Open immediately before midnight. This is not fear. This is protection. This is not panic. This is prevention. When God warns, it is because He loves. When God interrupts, it is because He sees what you cannot yet see. April 5th carries weight in the Spirit. There are days when heaven moves quietly, and there are days when heaven moves with urgency. Today is a day marked by urgency. You may have felt it already, a strange tension in the air, an unexplainable heaviness in your chest, a sense that something is not quite right. You tried to brush it off. You told yourself it was stress. You blamed it on work, on family responsibilities, on exhaustion. But deep down, there has been a whisper inside you saying, pay attention. That whisper is not anxiety. That whisper is the Holy Spirit alerting you. God is saying clearly, you have been under spiritual attack. Not everything is physical. Not everything is coincidence. Some battles are strategic. Some disruptions are calculated. The enemy does not always announce his presence with noise. Sometimes he works through subtle division, unexplained frustration, sudden arguments, or strange disturbances in your peace. He targets what matters most. And for you, the target has been your home. Your home is not just walls and furniture. Your home is where your peace rests. Your home is where your family gathers. Your home is where you pray, where you dream, where you recover from the world. If the enemy can disturb your home, he can disturb your focus. If he can shake your home, he can shake your stability. And that is why this warning is so serious. God is not exaggerating when He says something serious is trying to develop. He is exposing it before it takes form. There is a spiritual threshold approaching tonight. Midnight is not just a time on a clock. In the spiritual realm, midnight represents transition. It represents the crossing from one state into another. It represents moments where decisions determine direction. That is why the Lord is urging you not to delay. Open immediately before midnight. That instruction is not symbolic. It is intentional. Timing matters. Obedience matters. Awareness matters. The danger is not that something has already happened. The danger is that something is trying to happen. And heaven is intervening early. You were not meant to find this message tomorrow. You were not meant to see this next week. You were meant to see it now. Because once you are aware, the attack loses secrecy. Once you are alert, darkness loses advantage. And once you respond, heaven moves. Do not ignore how specific this feels. Do not dismiss the way your spirit reacted when you read the words, you have been under spiritual attack. There was a recognition. There was a confirmation. Something inside you said that explains it. The unusual tension. The strange patterns. The feeling that peace had been fragile lately. God is connecting the dots for you. He is showing you that what seemed random has been coordinated. What seemed small had been strategic. And this is why you cannot scroll past this message. Scrolling past would mean ignoring a warning that was sent out of love. God does not shout unless it is necessary. He does not interrupt casually. If this message feels urgent, it is because it is urgent. If this feels rare, it is because moments like this are rare. There are times when heaven steps in quietly, and there are times when heaven says, "Stop. Listen. Act." Something serious does not mean something inevitable. It means something preventable. And prevention requires awareness. Tonight is about awareness. Tonight is about recognizing that you are not crazy. You are not overthinking, and you are not imagining things. There had been resistance around your household. There has been pressure around your peace. And God is saying, "I see it, and I am exposing it before it escalates." The enemy was hoping you would stay distracted, hoping you would dismiss the signs, hoping you would blame each other instead of recognizing the source. But exposure changes everything. Warning changes outcomes. And obedience shifts atmospheres. So right now, understand this clearly. This message is not here to scare you. It is here to position you. It is here to activate protection. It is here to prepare you before midnight crosses over. Because what happens next depends on whether you treat this as just another video or as a divine interruption sent specifically for you on April 5th. Now that you know this is not random, now that you understand this warning carries urgency, you must look closer at what has been happening around you. Because when God says you have been under spiritual attack, He is not speaking in mystery. He is pointing to patterns. He is uncovering signs you may have overlooked. And the truth is, the attack did not begin loudly. It began subtly. Think about the atmosphere in your home over the past few days or weeks. Has there been unusual tension? Moments where small disagreements suddenly escalated into arguments that felt out of proportion. Words spoken that did not even sound like you. Silence that felt heavier than it should. Spiritual attacks often begin with irritation, with miscommunication, with emotional distance. The goal is simple: divide the peace. Because once peace is fractured, clarity becomes harder to maintain. Maybe you have noticed financial pressure appearing unexpectedly, bills increasing, expenses you did not plan for, resources feeling tighter than usual. Financial strain is one of the enemy's oldest tactics against households. Not because money itself holds power, but because stress changes behavior. Stress creates fear. Fear opens doors to doubt. And doubt weakens spiritual confidence. The attack may not be about the money at all. It may be about shaking your trust. And what about your sleep? Have you been waking up at strange hours? Experiencing restless nights? Dreams that feel unsettling or confusing? Midnight hours have felt active lately, haven't they? You may have brushed it off as stress or exhaustion, but sometimes disrupted rest is a signal. When peace is disturbed in the night, it affects your strength in the day. The enemy knows that a tired mind is more vulnerable to discouragement. Then there is distraction, an unusual resistance to prayer, a sudden busyness that keeps pushing spiritual time aside. Every time you try to sit quietly, something interrupts. A notification, a task, a thought. Spiritual attacks often aim to disconnect you from your source before you even realize you are drifting. Not by removing your faith, but by crowding your focus. Have you also felt an emotional heaviness without a clear cause? A weight that lingers in certain rooms? A sense that something shifted but you cannot explain when? Homes carry spiritual atmospheres. They absorb words, attitudes, energy. When an attack is directed at a household, it often shows up as an invisible pressure, not dramatic, but persistent. And here's what makes it dangerous. Because it is subtle, it feels manageable. Because it is gradual, it feels normal. But normal tension should not feel constant. Normal stress should not feel strategic. If multiple areas of your home, emotional, financial, spiritual, have been under strain at the same time, that is not coincidence. That is coordination. God is not revealing this to accuse you. He is revealing it to awaken you. The moment you recognize the pattern begins to lose power. Awareness is spiritual defense. And today, April 5th, heaven is lifting the veil. Let me ask you something honestly. When you first heard the words "you have been under spiritual attack," did something inside you say that explains it? That reaction is not imagination. It is confirmation. There hath been resistance. There has been interference. But the fact that you are hearing this now means the attack has been exposed before it could fully mature. This is the moment where you choose how to respond. Do not brush this aside. Do not minimize it. Instead, acknowledge it. Even right now, in your heart, say, "God, I see it." Because once you see it, you can confront it. And if this message is confirming what you have been sensing, I want you to take a bold step. Like this video as a declaration that you are not ignoring this warning. Comment, "I receive this warning," as an act of agreement with heaven. And if you know someone whose home has felt under pressure lately, share this message with them immediately. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss the instructions that follow. This is not about growing a platform. This is about strengthening households before midnight. When you engage, you are not just interacting with content, you are aligning with protection. Because what you do next matters. The signs were never meant to scare you. They were meant to signal you. And the fact that you are still here, still listening, means you are ready to confront what has been hiding in plain sight. The attack tried to move quietly. It tried to make you doubt yourself. It tried to convince you that everything was just stress, just personality clashes, just coincidence. But heaven has interrupted that narrative. And now that you see the signs, the next step becomes critical. Because in the next part, I will reveal why your home specifically became the target, and what the enemy is afraid of happening through your household. And when you understand that, everything will make sense. Now we must answer the question that has been forming in your spirit since the beginning. Why your home? Why not someone else's? Why did the pressure circle around your household, your peace, your family, your space? The answer is not random. The answer is prophetic. The attack targeted your home because your home carries something valuable. It carries promise. It carries calling. It carries generational impact that has not even fully manifested yet. The enemy does not waste strategy on emptiness. He studies potential. He watches movement. He observes growth. And when he senses that a household is on the verge of breakthrough, he attempts interference before manifestation. Your home has been moving towards something greater. There had been quiet spiritual development happening, prayers whispered, faith growing, decisions shifting, patterns breaking. You may not have seen dramatic change yet, but in the unseen realm, momentum hath been building. Your household is not ordinary. There is influence attached to it. There are people connected to your obedience. There are future testimonies that will come from your address. The enemy recognized that if peace remains in your home, stability will follow. If stability remains, clarity will increase. If clarity increases, obedience strengthens. And when obedience strengthens, destiny accelerates. So the strategy was simple. Disturb the foundation before the structure rises higher. This attack was not about small arguments. It was not about temporary stress. It was about destabilization. If the enemy can make your home feel chaotic, he can slow down what God is establishing. If he can introduce tension, he can weaken agreement. And agreement is powerful. Scripture reminds us that when two or more are in unity, heaven responds. So division becomes the target. But here is the deeper truth. April 5th marks exposure. What was hidden is now being revealed. What was subtle is now being named. And once something is named, it loses its camouflage. God is interrupting the escalation before it becomes visible damage. He is not reacting late. He is intervening early. There are generational blessings attached to your household. Patterns that were meant to stop with you. Cycles that were meant to break in your lifetime. The enemy sensed the shift. He felt the resistance weakening. He recognized that your prayers were gaining strength. So he applied pressure, not to destroy you instantly, but to exhaust you gradually. Because exhaustion makes people careless, and carelessness opens doors. But heaven saw the strategy. Heaven saw the timing. And heaven released a warning before something serious could take root. This is not a message of doom. It is a message of disruption. Disruption of darkness. Consider this carefully. If your home was insignificant, there would be no reason to attack it. The presence of resistance is evidence of value. The presence of tension is evidence of territory. The enemy only fights over what matters. And this is where the shift begins. Because once you understand that your home is targeted due to purpose, fear loses its grip. You are not under attack because you are weak. You are under attack because you are advancing. You are not experiencing resistance because you are failing. You are experiencing resistance because you are threatening something in the unseen realm. Your home carries light, and light irritates darkness. But here is what changes everything. Exposure reverses momentum. The moment you recognize the reason behind the attack, you reposition yourself from victim to authority. You move from confusion to clarity. And clarity restores power. There is something about to happen next that explains the timing of this warning and why midnight specifically matters for your household. What I'm about to reveal connects the spiritual strategy to the clock itself. Hold on. What comes next shifts the entire atmosphere of this message. Before we move forward, seal this moment with agreement. Type "My home is covered" in the comments if this resonates with you. Lesson code 314 is now activated over your household. If this message has opened your eyes, understand that this channel exists for moments exactly like this. When you sow into this mission through super thanks, membership, or a PayPal donation using the link in the description or the PayPal QR code flashing on the screen, you are not supporting a platform. You are fueling a spiritual alarm system that reaches homes before midnight strikes. Scripture declares, "As you sow, so shall you reap." And this is not ancient history. This is God speaking life over your seed right now. When you give, you are placing oil in the lamp so light continues to burn in dark places. I feel led to say this plainly. I am inviting you to act in this moment of revelation. Do not treat this as a donation. Treat it as a prophetic response. As you release your seed, may protection surround your home, may provision overtake your family, and may peace settle in every room. Step into obedience. Sow the seed. Activate the harvest. Now we must talk about the timing. Because the warning was not just about an attack. It was specific. It said, "Open immediately before midnight." That instruction carries weight. Midnight is not just the end of a day. Midnight is a spiritual threshold. It is a crossing point. It is the dividing line between what was and what will be. And in the unseen realm, Thresholds matter. Throughout Scripture, midnight has marked moments of divine intervention and sudden shifts. Midnight is when chains fell. Midnight is when cries were heard. Midnight is when heaven responded to situations that looked impossible hours earlier. There is something about that hour that represents decision. It represents culmination. It represents the final moment before a transition locks in. And this is why the urgency matters. When God tells you to respond before midnight, He is not trying to create panic. He is marking a window. A spiritual window where obedience has amplified power. There are moments when action carries multiplied effect because of timing. Just like seasons in the natural world determine harvest, seasons in the spirit determine breakthrough. And tonight is not an ordinary night. The enemy understands thresholds too. He understands that if he can push tension, fear, or confusion across a spiritual boundary into the next cycle, it becomes harder to uproot. That is why escalation often intensifies near moments of change. Have you noticed that pressure seems to peak right before things shift? That is not accidental. It is strategic resistance before transition. Midnight represents transition in your household right now. Something has been trying to cross over with you, not physically, but spiritually. A pattern, a disturbance, a heaviness. And heaven is saying, stop it at the door. Do not allow what has been circling your home to cross into the next phase unchecked. This is why delay is dangerous. When you ignore a divine nudge, the opportunity does not always remain the same. Windows close. Seasons shift. And while God is merciful, timing still carries consequence. If you treat this as casual, you risk carrying unnecessary weight into tomorrow. But if you respond with awareness and authority, you interrupt the progression. Midnight is symbolic of decision. Will you sleep through the warning? Or will you stand alert? Will you assume everything is fine? Or will you pray, declare, and close every open door? The enemy thrives in spiritual laziness. He hopes you will say, "I'll deal with this later." He hopes exhaustion will override obedience. But remember what we uncovered in the last part. Your home is targeted because it carries purpose. And purpose requires vigilance. There is another reason midnight matters. It is the quietest hour. Distractions slow down. Noise fades. And in that stillness, spiritual activity becomes more noticeable. If there has been restlessness at night, if there has been unusual stirring in the late hours, that is not coincidence. It is a sign that the battlefield has been active when you were meant to be resting. But here is the powerful truth. Midnight can also become your moment of reversal. What the enemy intended as escalation can become your moment of declaration. What was meant to cross over can be stopped at the boundary. Because thresholds work both ways. Just as negativity can attempt to move forward, authority can shut it down. Tonight is about drawing a line. It is about walking through your home with awareness. It is about praying intentionally. It is about speaking peace out loud instead of assuming silence is enough. There is power in verbal declaration. There is power in naming your home as protected territory. When you acknowledge God's authority within your walls, you shift the atmosphere. And understand this clearly. You are not responding from fear. You are responding from strength. Fear reacts. Authority acts. Fear panics. Authority positions. When you choose to respond before midnight, you are aligning with heaven's timing, not reacting to darkness. There are moments when the difference between escalation and protection is a single act of obedience. A prayer spoken, a declaration made, A conscious decision to cleanse the atmosphere with worship instead of worry. Do not underestimate small acts tonight. Do not underestimate a whispered prayer over your doorway. Do not underestimate calling peace into every room. Spiritual authority does not require volume. It requires confidence. Because something serious was attempting to form. Not guaranteed, attempting. And attempts can be stopped. Plans can be dismantled. Strategies can be overturned. But intervention must happen before the threshold closes. Midnight is not meant to scare you. It is meant to empower you. It is heaven's deadline for disruption. It is the moment where you stand between what was trying to develop and what God is preserving. So as the clock moves closer to that hour, do not feel anxiety. Feel focus. Feel clarity. Feel determination. Because now you understand why this message could not wait until tomorrow. Now you understand why April 5th carried urgency. Now you understand that timing and obedience are working together. The next step will reveal where these attacks gained access in the first place. The hidden entry points that must be sealed so this does not attempt to return. Now that you understand the urgency of midnight and the importance of timing, we must go deeper. Because stopping an attack is one thing, preventing its return is another. And that requires identifying the hidden entry points. Every spiritual attack looks for access. It does not simply appear without permission. It looks for caves. It searches for openings. Not always obvious ones, but subtle, neglected, emotional, or spiritual openings that go unnoticed. You may be wondering, did I do something wrong? This is not about condemnation. This is about awareness. Entry points are not always acts of rebellion. Sometimes they are wounds left untreated. Sometimes they are words spoken in frustration. Sometimes they are atmospheres tolerated instead of corrected. One of the most common entry points is prolonged fear. Fear is more than an emotion. It is an agreement. When fear lingers without being challenged, it creates a spiritual environment where doubt feels welcome. If there has been ongoing anxiety about finances, about health, about your family's future, and those fears have been rehearsed repeatedly, that repetition can create a door. Not because you are weak, but because fear, when entertained, shifts focus away from faith. Another entry point is unresolved conflict. When arguments happen and are never fully healed, residue remains. Words carry weight. Tone carries energy. If harsh statements were spoken and never corrected, they can linger in the atmosphere of a home. Over time, that residue becomes familiar, and what becomes familiar stops being confronted. The enemy thrives in unresolved tension because it weakens unity slowly. Distraction is also a powerful doorway. Not dramatic distraction, but gradual drifting. Verdtime Journ. Uripas gone. Spiritual conversations replaced with constant noise. When the spiritual temperature of a home cools down, even slightly, it becomes easier for interference to slip in unnoticed. Again, this is not about guilt. It is about recognizing patterns. There are also emotional wounds that act as entry points. Old betrayals, past disappointments, lingering resentment from seasons long gone. If those wounds were never fully surrendered, they can become silent agreements with pain. And pain, when not healed, creates vulnerability. The enemy does not create wounds, but he exploits unhealed ones. Another subtle entry point is spoken negativity over the home itself. Words like "this house is always chaotic," "where nothing ever goes right for us," may feel harmless in frustration. But repeated declarations shape atmosphere. Your home responds to what is spoken within it. If negativity has been declared often, even jokingly, it can create permission for instability to feel normal. Technology can also serve as an unnoticed gateway. What enters through screens influences atmosphere. Entertainment, conversations, media, all of it leaves impressions. If content filled with fear, anger, or darkness has been flowing consistently into your space, it affects spiritual tone. The enemy does not need dramatic rituals to gain access. Sometimes all he needs is consistent exposure to negativity. And then there is exhaustion. Physical and emotional exhaustion lowers spiritual alertness. When you are tired, you are less likely to pray intentionally, less likely to correct the atmosphere, less likely to confront subtle shifts. Exhaustion does not mean you invited the attack. It means you may not have noticed when the door cracked open. But here is the empowering truth. If a door was opened, it can be closed. If a crack formed, it can be sealed. Awareness restores authority. Once you identify the possible entry points, you are no longer vulnerable in the same way. Tonight is not just about resisting an attack. It is about cleansing your space intentionally. Walk through your home with fresh awareness. Listen to the tone of your conversations. Pay attention to the words spoken. Reflect on unresolved tension. Invite healing where there has been silence. You do not need elaborate rituals. You need intention. You need humility. You need declaration. Close every door that fear tried to open. Close every crack that resentment tried to widen. Close every pathway distraction tried to normalize. Remember, the enemy prefers hidden access. Exposure disrupts him. When you say out loud, "This home belongs to God," you are not speaking poetry. You are reestablishing ownership. When you choose forgiveness, you are not just being kind. You are sealing an entry point. When you replace negative declarations with promises of peace, you are shifting the foundation. And understand this clearly. Identifying entry points is not about obsessing over what went wrong. It is about strengthening what is right. Your home is not fragile. It is recoverable. It is defensible. It is protectable. In the next part, we will uncover how these subtle entry points form patterns of escalation, how small disruptions try to grow into serious consequences if left unchecked. Now that you have seen the hidden entry points, you must understand something even more critical. Spiritual attacks rarely explode overnight. They escalate. They grow quietly. They build momentum through small, repeated disruptions until what once felt minor becomes overwhelming. That is the pattern. And if you can recognize the pattern, you can break it before it reaches something serious. Escalation always begins subtly. A small disagreement that lingers longer than it should. A financial inconvenience that triggers disproportionate stress. A restless night that turns into several nights of fatigue. Each moment by itself seems manageable. But the enemy's strategy is not in the individual moment. It is in accumulation. Think about it. A single spark does not destroy a structure, but a spark left unattended can grow. In the same way, a single tense conversation is not the danger. The danger is when tension becomes the new normal, when irritation becomes expected, when patience grows thin and compassion feels distant. That is how escalation works, through normalization. When something unhealthy becomes familiar, it stops being confronted. And when it stops being confronted, it grows roots. The enemy counts on your ability to adapt. Humans adapt quickly to discomfort. You tell yourself, "This is just a busy season," or "We are just under pressure right now." And while those statements may feel reasonable, they can also mask progression. What was once unusual becomes tolerated. What was once temporary becomes pattern. Escalation also feeds on emotional reaction. The more reactive you become, the more instability spreads. A raised voice triggers another raised voice. Stress triggers impatience. Impatience triggers withdrawal. Withdrawal triggers suspicion. And before long, the atmosphere of your home shifts from peace to pressure without a clear starting point. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern forming. Another sign of escalation is spiritual numbness. At first, you feel the tension clearly. You notice the heaviness. But over time, you become less sensitive to it. You adjust. You move through your day without addressing it. This is one of the most dangerous phases because numbness creates vulnerability. When you stop sensing the shift, you stop resisting it. The warning you received before something serious happens in your home is not predicting destruction. It is interrupting escalation. It is heaven stepping in between stage 1 and stage 5. Because once escalation reaches visible crisis, repair becomes harder. Not impossible, but harder. There is also a relational pattern in escalation. Small misunderstandings begin to affect trust. Trust begins to thin. Communication begins to suffer. And eventually, unity weakens. When unity weakens, vulnerability increases. This is why the attack targeted your home specifically. Because a united home is strong. A divided home is easier to destabilize. Escalation does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it looks like silence. Conversations becoming shorter. Laughter becoming less frequent. Warmth becoming mechanical. These are not just emotional shifts. They are signals. Financial escalation follows a similar pattern. Stress creates urgency. Urgency creates right decision. Right decisions create mistakes. And suddenly the financial pressure feels larger than the original issue. The attack is not about the amount of money. It is about destabilizing your confidence and creating cycles of reaction. And here is something even deeper. Escalation often intensifies when you are close to breakthrough. Resistance increases when progress threatens darkness. If your household has been growing spiritually, even quietly, the pressure may have intensified because advancement was near. Escalation is sometimes a last attempt to discourage you before elevation. But here is the powerful truth. Patterns can be reversed. The same way negativity escalates through repetition, peace can escalate through intention. One calm response can interrupt a chain of reactions. One moment of prayer can shift the emotional temperature. One act of forgiveness can dismantle weeks of tension. Escalation thrives on automatic behavior. It collapses under intentional action. Awareness is your advantage. You now see the pattern. You now recognize how small disruptions tried to multiply. And once a pattern is visible, it loses its secrecy. The enemy's greatest strength is invisibility. But exposure strips that strength away. Do not underestimate the power of interrupting a cycle early. Do not wait for visible damage before acting. The warning came before the seriousness because heaven prefers prevention over repair. And now that you see the pattern of escalation, the next step becomes clear. It is not enough to close entry points. You must actively restore order. You must implement a protection strategy that reinforces peace and establishes authority over your household. In the next part, we will uncover the specific protection strategy God is activating tonight. Practical spiritual actions that shift atmosphere immediately and reclaim territory. Now that you recognize the pattern of escalation, now that you understand how subtle disruptions tried to grow into something serious, it is time to move from awareness into action. Because heaven never reveals a strategy of darkness without releasing a strategy of protection. God does not expose an attack and then leave you defenseless. He exposes it so you can enforce authority. Tonight is about activation. The first part of the protection strategy is intentional prayer. Not rushed prayer. Not distracted prayer. Intentional prayer. Walk through your home physically if you can. Stand in the doorway of each room. Speak peace into the atmosphere. You do not need complicated words. Authority does not require eloquence. Simply declare that your home belongs to God. Declare that every room is covered. Declare that no negative influence is permitted to remain. There is something powerful about speaking aloud. Silent thoughts are internal. Spoken declarations shift atmosphere. When you vocalize peace, you release alignment. When you speak protection, you reinforce boundaries. The enemy thrives in silence because silence often means passivity. But when you open your mouth with intention, you disrupt passivity. The second part of the strategy is agreement. If you live with others, invite them into unity. Even if it is brief, even if it feels simple, agreement multiplies strength. A home that stands together closes doors faster than one person fighting alone. If there hath been tension, tonight is the night to soften it. A simple conversation, a sincere apology, a shared prayer. Unity restores spiritual structure. The third part is cleansing the atmosphere. This does not mean ritual. It means resetting tone. Turn on worship music that fills your home with peace. Open windows if possible. Let fresh air move. Sometimes physical action symbolizes spiritual intention. Remove anything in your home that consistently triggers negativity or heaviness. Be honest about what enters your space through media, conversations, or habits. Protection includes discernment. The fourth part of the strategy is forgiveness. Unforgiveness is one of the strongest anchors for escalation. Even if someone in your household hurt you, release it before midnight. Forgiveness is not weakness. It is authority. It breaks cycles. It closes spiritual doors that resentment tries to hold open. When you forgive, you disrupt the enemy's foothold. The fifth part is restoring spiritual rhythm. Set a new tone tonight. Even if it is small, even if it is 5 minutes of gratitude spoken out loud, shift the atmosphere intentionally. Thank God for protection before you see visible evidence. Gratitude strengthens faith. Faith strengthens protection. And here is something critical. Remove fear from your posture. This strategy is not about reacting in panic. It is about responding in confidence. You are not fighting for your home from a position of weakness. You are reinforcing what already belongs to God. That changes everything. Remember what we uncovered earlier. Your home was targeted because it carries value. Protection is not about desperation. It is about stewardship. You are stewarding peace. You are stewarding unity. You are stewarding purpose. There may be moments tonight when doubt whispers, "Is this really necessary?" Silence that doubt immediately. Obedience does not require full understanding. It requires trust. And trust activates covering. You may not see dramatic changes instantly, but spiritual shifts often begin quietly. The heaviness may begin to lift gradually. Conversations may soften. Sleep may return peacefully. Do not underestimate small signs of restoration. They are evidence that authority has been re-established. Another powerful step is to declare ownership over your household. Say clearly, "This home is protected territory." Say it with conviction. The enemy does not respond to hesitation. He responds to certainty. Certainty closes doors quickly. Understand that this protection strategy is not a one-night reaction. It is the beginning of a renewed awareness. Continue paying attention to atmosphere. Continue correcting attention quickly. Continue guarding what enters your space. Protection becomes sustainable when vigilance becomes habit. And tonight, before midnight, as you implement these steps, something will begin to shift. The escalation that was attempting to form will lose momentum. The seriousness that was trying to develop will weaken, because intervention disrupts progression. But there is one more powerful turning point ahead. There is a breaking point where the attack not only stops, it collapses. In the next part, we will uncover the moment the attack loses its power completely and what happens in your home when that shift takes place. There comes a moment in every spiritual battle when pressure reaches its limit. A point where what has been building can no longer sustain itself. A breaking point. And tonight, as you stand aware, intentional, and aligned before midnight, you are approaching that moment. The attack that tried to grow quietly in your home as a threshold to. It cannot expand indefinitely once exposed. It cannot thrive under authority. And it certainly cannot survive in an atmosphere that has been reclaimed. The breaking point does not always look dramatic. Sometimes it is subtle. Sometimes it feels like a sudden calm after weeks of tension. Sometimes it is a conversation that unexpectedly softens. Sometimes it is a night of deep, uninterrupted sleep after restless evenings. But make no mistake, when the breaking point arrives, something shifts in the unseen before it becomes visible in the natural. What has been feeding the attack? Secrecy, silence, gradual escalation. But you have disrupted all three. You exposed it. You confronted it. You acted before midnight. And then changes the equation. When darkness loses secrecy, it loses structure. When it loses structure, it collapses. You may begin to sense a lightness in your home, an emotional reset, a clarity that replaces confusion. That is not coincidence. That is the atmosphere responding to authority. Because when you declared your home protected territory, when you chose forgiveness over resentment, when you replaced fear with faith, you shifted spiritual alignment. This is the breaking point, when your response outweighs the resistance. The enemy anticipated distraction. The anticipated delay. The anticipated exhaustion. What he did not anticipate was your awareness on April 5th. He did not anticipate your decision to stand before midnight and say, "Not here. Not in this house." The declaration becomes a spiritual boundary line. There is something else happening at this breaking point. Angels respond to alignment. When a household aligns itself intentionally with God's authority, reinforcement is released. Protection intensifies. Guardrails strengthen. The unseen realm is not passive. It reacts to obedience. You may not see angels with your physical eyes, but peace is evidence of their presence. Stability is evidence. Restored communication is evidence. Financial wisdom replacing panic is evidence. The breaking point does not just stop the attack, it begins restoration. And here's the powerful truth. Once the attack breaks, fear must break with it. Do not allow lingering anxiety to recreate what has been dismantled. The enemy sometimes attempts to replay old thoughts even after momentum is lost. Resist that. Stand firm in what has shifted. This is also the moment where gratitude becomes critical. Thank God for the protection before you see every detail resolved. Gratitude seals breakthroughs. It acknowledges that the unseen shift is real even before visible proof arrives. But there is something even greater ahead. Because after the breaking point comes rebuilding. After the collapse of tension comes the strengthening of unity. What happens after this shift will surprise you in the most powerful way. The atmosphere that was once fragile will begin to feel fortified. The peace that felt distant will begin to feel anchored. And you will look back at this warning not with fear, but with gratitude. Before we step into what follows this collapse, seal this moment of authority. Type "IT ends tonight" in the comments as a declaration that the escalation stops here. Blessing code 582 is now activated over your household. And hear this carefully. You will be glad you stayed for what is about to unfold next, because what follows the breaking point is not just protection. It is reinforcement. When you respond to a message like this, you are not just protecting your own home. You are helping protect countless others who may never recognize the warning in time. When you sow into this mission through super thanks, by becoming a member, or by sending a PayPal donation through the link in the description or the QR code on your screen, you are pouring oil into a lamp that refuses to go out. God declares, "Give, and it shall be given unto you," and that promise breathes even now. I am inviting you personally to act in this sacred window. Do not see it as a transaction. See it as planting into soil that rescues households before escalation turns serious. As you release your seed, may your home experience multiplied peace, guarded rest, and supernatural stability. Step forward in obedience. Toe boldly. Let your giving become part of someone else's breaking point victory. There is one more strategy the enemy depends on, and it is more subtle than fear, more dangerous than tension, and more persistent than distraction. It is isolation. If he cannot overpower your home directly, he will try to convince you to stand alone. Because isolation weakens resistance. Isolation distorts perception. Isolation makes pressure feel heavier than it actually is. When you believe you are the only one experiencing strain, you stop reaching out. When you assume no one else would understand, you remain silent. And silence, over time, creates vulnerability. The enemy thrives in secrecy. He hopes you will internalize the battle instead of bringing it into agreement with others. But you were never meant to fight alone. There is strength in agreement. There is reinforcement in shared prayer. When two or more stand together in faith, resistance multiplies against darkness. A united voice carries weight. A shared declaration strengthens atmosphere. That is why division was targeted earlier, because unity is dangerous to the enemy's plans. If there has been distance between you and someone in your household, this is the moment to close it, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if pride whispers that you should wait. Rejoice the gab. Start the conversation. Invite prayer together. Agreement restores structural integrity in ways you cannot fully see. And beyond your immediate home, remember this. There is a community connected to this message. You are not watching alone. You are not responding alone. There are others who heard the same warning tonight. Others who felt the same confirmation. Others who are standing before midnight declaring protection over their households. When you comment your declaration, when you share your agreement, you are strengthening someone else's resolve. You may never meet them. You may never know their names. But your voice adds weight to a collective stand. And that collective stand matters. The enemy wants you to believe your battle is isolated. He wants you to think the tension in your home is unique. He wants you to assume your struggles are personal failures. But they are not. Resistance often targets households that are growing, advancing, or preparing for breakthrough. Do not carry this alone. If you know someone whose home has felt heavy lately, send this message to them immediately. Do not hesitate. Do not assume they will find it on their own. Be the messenger that interrupts escalation in their household too. Because sometimes protection spreads through simple obedience. And if you have not yet committed to staying connected here, this is the moment. Subscribe to this channel so you remain covered by future warnings and reinforcements. Like this video to strengthen its reach so others standing at their own midnight threshold can see it in time. Comment "I stand in agreement" as a public declaration that your household is not isolated but aligned. This is not about numbers. It is about network. A spiritual network of households refusing to be destabilized. A network of unity replacing isolation. A network of agreement overpowering escalation. There is something powerful about knowing you are not the only one standing guard tonight. It strengthens your posture. It sharpens your awareness. It reminds you that God often moves through collective faith. Isolation magnifies fear. Agreement magnifies faith. If the enemy attempted to isolate you emotionally, withdraw from that lie. If he attempted to isolate your household relationally, bridge the gap tonight. If he attempted to isolate you spiritually, reconnect intentionally. And here is the truth. Unity not only protects, it accelerates restoration. When agreement fills a home, peace returns faster. When voices align in prayer, atmosphere shifts deeper. When isolation breaks, momentum builds. You are not alone in this battle. You are not the only one confronting escalation. You are not the only one responding before midnight. And as you align with others in agreement, something powerful solidifies over your household. In the next part, we must confront something sobering. What happens when warnings are ignored? Not to create fear, but to deepen your understanding of why obedience tonight matters more than you realize. There are moments in life when a warning becomes a turning point. A single decision to listen, or to ignore, can alter the course of what follows. Tonight is one of those moments. This message is not meant to instill fear but to awaken discernment. When God speaks, it is never without purpose. When he warns, it is always an act of mercy. And when that warning is ignored, the consequences are not punishments from heaven, but the result of neglecting divine protection. Throughout history and scripture, warnings have been sent ahead of danger, not to frighten, but to prepare. They were invitations to change direction, opportunities to avoid unnecessary suffering. Those who responded in obedience experienced preservation, while those who dismissed the signs often faced hardship that could have been prevented. This pattern reveals a powerful truth. God's warnings are acts of love designed to shield, guide, and protect. Ignoring a divine warning does not make the threat disappear. It simply allows what is already forming to continue unchecked. Like a small crack in a foundation, what begins as minor can grow into something serious when left unaddressed. At first, the damage seems insignificant, almost invisible. But over time, pressure widens the fracture until stability is compromised. In the same way, spiritual neglect can allow tension, confusion, and discord to take root within a household. When a warning is dismissed, awareness fades. Without awareness, vigilance weakens. Without vigilance, vulnerability increases. And vulnerability creates space for escalation. What could have been corrected with a simple act of obedience becomes more complicated to repair. Not impossible, but heavier. Not irreversible, but more painful. Consider how often people attribute problems solely to circumstance when they could have been prevented through discernment. A strained relationship left unattended. A lingering resentment allowed to grow. A restless spirit ignored instead of addressed through prayer. These may appear to be ordinary issues, yet when combined, they form a pattern that slowly erodes peace within a home. Ignoring a warning can also lead to spiritual desensitization. The first time God prompts you, the urgency feels unmistakable. But when that prompting is repeatedly dismissed, sensitivity begins to fade. But once stirred, conviction becomes easier to overlook. Over time, the voice that was meant to guide you feels distant, not because God stopped speaking, but because it was not heeded. This is one of the most serious consequences, not the presence of trouble, but the absence of awareness. When sensitivity diminishes, clarity becomes clouded. Decisions become reactive rather than guided. Peace becomes fragile instead of stable, and confusion replaces confidence. The enemy thrives in such conditions, not because he has gained authority, but because neglect has created opportunity. Yet understand this clearly: God does not warn to condemn, He warns to redeem. His desire is never destruction, but preservation. The message you are hearing today is not a prediction of doom. It is a divine interruption. It is heaven stepping into your timeline to prevent what could otherwise unfold. Ignoring it would not anger God. It would simply mean missing the protection He lovingly extended. There is also a deeper consequence of ignoring a warning: regret. Regret whispers, "If only I had listened." It echoes in hindsight when prevention was once within reach. But God's intention is not to leave you with regret. He has given you this message precisely so you will not have to face that question later. He is offering clarity now so that peace may remain intact. Tonight, the choice is before you. Will you treat this as coincidence, or will you recognize it as divine timing? Will you dismiss it as mere words, or will you receive it as a spiritual lifeline? The difference between escalation and preservation lies in your response. Obedience is rarely complicated. It is often simple, yet profound. A prayer spoken with sincerity. A declaration made with faith. A conscious decision to guard your home and align your heart with God's guidance. These acts may seem small, but they carry immense spiritual authority. To ignore this warning would be to walk forward without the shield that has already been offered. But to heed it is to step into protection, clarity, and peace. It is to acknowledge that God's voice is not distant, but present, speaking with urgency because He cares deeply for you and your household. As the clock moves closer to midnight, let this truth settle in your spirit. Warnings are not threats. They are gifts. They are expressions of divine love designed to prevent unnecessary hardship. And tonight, you have been given such a gift. The next part will reveal what happens when this warning is embraced, how the atmosphere of your home begins to shift, how peace is restored, and how God's covering settles over every room. Something extraordinary happens when a divine warning is received with obedience. The same atmosphere that once felt heavy begins to shift. The same rooms that carried tension begin to breathe with peace. When you respond to God's voice, you do not merely avoid danger, you invite transformation. Tonight is not just about preventing something serious. It is about experiencing a supernatural turning within your home. The turning of the atmosphere begins quietly. It does not always arrive with thunder or dramatic signs. Instead, it often reveals itself through subtle changes. A sense of calm replaces uneasiness. Conversations become gentler. Restlessness gives way to clarity. What once felt oppressive begins to feel light. These are not coincidences. They are confirmations that heaven has intervened. When God's presence fills a space, confusion cannot remain. Where there was tension, unity begins to grow. Where there was anxiety, peace takes root. The heaviness that lingered without explanation begins to lift, as if an unseen burden has been removed. This is the power of divine alignment. When you respond in faith, You welcome God's authority into your household, and everything begins to reorder itself accordingly. You may notice that your thoughts become clearer. Decisions that once felt overwhelming now seem manageable. Fear loses its grip, replaced by confidence and assurance. The same problems that appeared intimidating begin to shrink in the presence of renewed faith. This is the evidence of a spiritual shift. It is not merely emotional relief, it is the restoration of divine order. As the atmosphere turns, relationships within your home begin to heal. Words spoken with kindness replace harsh tones. Understanding replaces misunderstanding. Hearts that once felt distant draw closer together. Even silence becomes peaceful rather than uncomfortable. This transformation is not accidental. It is the fruit of obedience. When God's presence is invited into your home, unity naturally follows. Sleep, too, begins to change. Where there were restless nights, there is now tranquility. Your mind settles. Your spirit rests. You awaken with renewed strength instead of lingering fatigue. This restoration of rest is a sacred sign, for peaceful sleep is one of the clearest indicators of divine covering. When God guards your home, even the night becomes a place of refuge. Provision also aligns with peace. Financial anxiety begins to ease as wisdom replaces panic. Opportunities appear where uncertainty once dominated. Solutions emerge that you had not considered before. This does not mean challenges vanish overnight, but it does mean they no longer control your perspective. Stability replaces fear, and confidence replaces worry. You begin to see that God has not only protected your home but is actively sustaining it. The turning of the atmosphere also restores joy. Laughter returns where silence once lingered. Gratitude replaces frustration. Hope replaces discouragement. Your home begins to feel warm again, not just physically, but spiritually. It becomes a sanctuary, a place of refuge where love, faith, and peace dwell together. This is how you know that God's hand is upon your household. And as the atmosphere shifts, so does your awareness. You become more sensitive to peace and more discerning of anything that threatens it. You recognize the value of guarding what has been restored. You speak with intention. You pray with confidence. You nurture unity with care. The transformation within your home becomes something you actively protect, knowing that it was secured through obedience. Perhaps the most powerful change is the sense of assurance that settles within your spirit. The fear that once whispered uncertainty is replaced with divine confidence. You no longer feel vulnerable. You feel covered. You no longer feel anxious. You feel anchored. You know, deep within, that your home has been safeguarded by the presence of God. This turning is not temporary. It is the beginning of a new spiritual season. The warning that once stirred urgency has now given way to peace. What was meant to harm has been interrupted. What was meant to escalate has been dismantled. In its place stands a renewed atmosphere, filled with stability and grace. Take a moment to imagine your home now, every room filled with calm, every heart reassured, every corner touched by divine peace. This is not wishful thinking. It is the reality that unfolds when you respond to God's voice. His protection does not merely shield. It restores, renews, and strengthens. As midnight approaches, let gratitude fill your heart. The turning has begun. The heaviness has lifted. The warning has fulfilled its purpose. Your obedience has invited peace, and your faith has welcomed divine protection. And the final part, we will bring this message to its powerful conclusion, a closing declaration of assurance, a prophetic blessing over your home, and a reaffirmation of God's unwavering presence and love. As we reach the end of this message, take a moment to reflect on the journey you have taken tonight. What began as an urgent warning has become a divine revelation. What started with concern has unfolded into clarity, protection, and peace. Today, on April 5th, God spoke with authority, declaring, "You have been under spiritual attack." Yet this was never a message of fear, it was a message of love. It was heaven's intervention, sent to shield your home before something serious could take root. You did not encounter this message by accident. You were guided here by divine timing, positioned to receive a warning that has now transformed into a promise. You have listened with discernment. You have responded with faith. And because of your obedience, the outcome has changed. The threat that once lingered in secrecy has been exposed. The escalation that attempted to grow has been interrupted. The heaviness that pressed against your household has been lifted. Tonight, you stood alert. You recognized the signs. You aligned with God's authority. And in doing so, you secured spiritual protection over your home. Let this truth settle deeply within your spirit. God warns because He loves, and He protects because He cares. His voice is not distant, nor is it reserved for the past. It is living, active, and present in your life. When He calls your attention, it is never to frighten you but to preserve you. When He speaks urgently, it is because His desire is to guard what matters most to you. Your home, your peace, your family, and your future are precious in His sight. Tonight, you answered that call. You have closed every hidden door. You have resisted every subtle attack. You have reclaimed authority over your household. And now, as midnight approaches, you stand not in fear but in confidence. Your home is no longer vulnerable. It is fortified. Your atmosphere is no longer troubled. It is restored. Your spirit is no longer burdened. It is reassured. Receive this prophetic declaration over your life. Your home is covered by divine protection. Your walls are guarded by heavenly authority. Every room is filled with peace. Every door is sealed with God's presence. Every plan formed against your household is dismantled. Every shadow of fear is replaced with the light of assurance. And every attempt of darkness is silenced by the power of God. From this night forward, let peace be your portion. Let unity flourish within your family. Let wisdom guide your decisions. Let rest fill your nights and clarity fill your days. May your home stand as a sanctuary of faith, a place where love dwells, hope thrives, and God's presence abides continually. Do not carry this message as a memory, carry it as a covenant. Return to it whenever you need reassurance. Let it remind you that heaven is attentive to your life. Let it assure you that you are never alone. The same God who warned you is the same God who watches over you, and His protection does not fade with time. Even now, declare with confidence that your household belongs to the Lord. Speak it aloud with faith. My home is protected. My family is covered. My peace is secure. As you affirm these words, you align yourself with divine authority and seal the victory that has been established tonight. Before we close, seal this moment with agreement. Type "My house belongs to God" in the comments as a declaration of faith. Blessing code 911 is now activated, marking your home with divine protection and spiritual assurance. As this prophetic message comes to its fulfillment, remember that every revelation you received tonight is part of a greater mission, to spread God's word to souls who are searching for truth and protection. When you sow through Super Thanks, become a channel member, or give via PayPal using the link in the description or the QR code displayed on your screen, you are lighting a lamp that guides others before midnight. Scripture declares, "Give, and it will be given to you." and this promise speaks directly into your life. As you release your seed, you become a vessel through which God's warning and protection reach countless homes around the world. I invite you now, step into obedience and partner in this sacred work. Your generosity becomes a prophetic act, opening heavens of blessing over your household. As you give, may your home overflow with peace, provision, and divine favor. Act now. Sow with faith. Let your offering become a testimony of God's glory. Thank you for listening, for believing, and for responding with faith. May your heart remain steadfast, your spirit uplifted, and your home forever protected. Go forward in peace, knowing that God is with you tonight, tomorrow, and always.